Dear friends, dear students, welcome to Political Science Pol 102 class. Today we'll be talking about the human rights. What is the human rights? It's actually an international set of values and set of ideas, set of liberties and freedoms that each individual on the earth should enjoy. That's the general description of the human rights. In democratic states, the citizenship rights and constitutions are based upon the Universal Human Rights Declaration of United Nations. Fundamental rights and freedoms given to individuals and to groups, of course, regardless of race, religion, language and gender, are called human rights. And an important quotation describing the human rights is, "All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights." So, if we believe in human rights, we have to consider every person to be equal with the others. There can be no kind of description against anyone. And the Article 1 of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights shows that to us rather significantly. Everyone is equal in dignity and rights. So everyone have the equal value as mankind, as humankind, regardless of gender, religion, ethnicity, language, and other forms of biological and social identities. And the human rights are interdependent, indivisible, and interrelated. So you cannot say, well, let's give half of the human rights to our citizens and let's don't give them the other half of the human rights. You cannot say that because they are interrelated, indivisible, and interdependent. Interdependent, indivisible, and interrelated. Three different futures. We have some conventions on the international human rights. The one is Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. So that's something, a convention created to provide gender equality at the global level. Equality between man and the woman. There is another convention, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, and as you can understand, that convention was created to eliminate all kinds of racial discrimination at the global level. And another convention about human rights is the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Dear friends, the persons with disabilities are living in more difficult conditions when compared to other healthy individuals. So we have to make life easier for the disabled individuals, and there is a convention for that. There is an international convention for that. And another convention is the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So we need to protect the children because their psychological background is rather vulnerable and they can be affected rather easily in a very, very bad and negative way. So we have to protect the children. Those conventions are amongst the important conventions that were created for the human rights. Dear friends, in the human rights we have two general approaches, cosmopolitanism and communitarianism. In cosmopolitanism, each individual and society in the world are believed to be in the position to enjoy the universal human rights. So each individual and each society in the world should enjoy the universal human rights. That's the cosmopolitan point of view. But in the communitarian point of view, based on the communitarianism, the human rights is a Western concept, and the non-Western societies should not be dictated to follow the human rights. That's interesting. According to the communitarian point of view, Each society has its own way of life, so if you dictate every society the human rights that were created in the West, that's some sort of imperialism, that's some sort of cultural imperialism. That's what the communitarian way of thought tells us. So in the communitarianism, in the communitarian way of thinking, each society should live their own life, so they must not be dictated the human rights. So let's talk about some fundamental human rights at the moment. The right to live. That's the first fundamental, most basic fundamental human right. The right to live. So everyone has the liberty to live and no one has the liberty to kill. That's the right to live. And accordingly, many states have they are no longer using the death penalty. Some states are doing that, yes, but some others, they are no longer executing people. They are no longer giving death penalties because of what? Because of the right to live. And another fundamental human right is the right to have medical treatment. Whoever you are, if you are ill, the state has to give you the necessary chances to get the medical treatment, whoever you are and wherever you are. The right to have education, that's another fundamental human right. No matter who you are, it's your fundamental right to go to the school and have the education. Right to own individual property, that's another fundamental human right, and right to travel, that's another fundamental human right. And what we are talking about in your own country, for instance, if the government says, well, no, you can go to this city but not that city, so that's a violation of the right to travel. Another thing, right to communicate. For instance, if you have a mobile phone and you are calling a friend, the government, the police or the intelligence service must not crack your phone and listen to your conversation according to the right to communicate. Of course, in some countries, because of the security reason, that privacy is violated, and the police forces or the intelligence forces, they are listening to some conversations, but that's for security reasons, and generally such decisions are made by courts, not by the police himself or herself. Right for legal defense, whoever you are, whatever your crime is, you have the right to have an advocate and defend you in the court. The right to defend your rights, that's another important fundamental human right. Wherever you are, you have some rights, including the human rights, and no one can deprive you of that right in the democratic states. The right to elect and be elected, that's another fundamental human right. Right for the privacy of the private life, that's another important human right. For instance, if someone hacks your computer and they get a picture, your own picture, and they try to post it through the internet, that's a violation of the privacy. So, in such cases, in some countries, there are some laws that are giving penalties to persons who take such actions. And another very important thing, the right to benefit the public services equally. That's another fundamental human right. What does that mean? For instance, if you are a foreigner in one country, as a tourist, as a student, whatever, and you are ill and you would like to go to the state hospital, they cannot tell you, well, you are foreigner, you are not our citizen, so go away, you cannot get medical treatment in our hospital. No, they cannot say that to you, because in the public services, everyone is equal. Or, for instance, another example, in a country where the majority is composed of Christians, a Muslim citizen cannot be said, well, you cannot be a civil servant because this is a Christian majority country, so we cannot give you jobs. No, public services should be fair and equal for everyone. That's another fundamental human right. Of course, dear friends, I have to underline something. Even in the democratic countries, there are some significant violations of human rights, and the human rights are always a debate, a form of debate. For instance, for the security reasons, the police forces are listening to the conversations, cell phone conversations, and some people claim that this is a violation of human right. But some others say, well, if we don't violate that thing and listen to the people's conversation, we will not be able to protect the other people. So, the human rights are always a debate, a source of debate in the political scholarship and in the political agenda, of course. In defending the human rights and in promoting the human rights, the European Court of Human Rights and the United Nations Human Rights Council are the international institutions and frameworks aimed at the defense and the promotion of human rights. Dear friends, the second topic for today is feminism and women in politics. Nordic states are amongst the top of the world ranking regarding gender equality and women's participation in politics. Nearly the half of the parliaments in Denmark, Norway, Sweden and Finland are composed of women. In North Cyprus, currently there are 50 seats in the parliament and we only have 4 women members of parliament. So, actually, many societies, many countries are a little bit more underdeveloped when compared to other states, other societies regarding the gender equality and women's participants in politics. In Nordic states, the social culture is based upon the gender equality. That's the advantage of the Nordic women. So, for instance, men are given permission for birth as well. And when their wives give birth to the children, the men might use permission to take care of the children. In many countries, that permission is only for women. For instance, if a woman gives birth, okay, let's go for a holiday, let's go for permission for some months and come back. But in some other countries, that right is given to the husbands as well, in Nordic countries, for instance. According to Pippa Norris, she is an important and famous political scientist, the level of women participation in politics and gender equality is the highest in Protestants, lower in Catholics, and the lowest in Orthodox and Muslim states, Orthodox and Muslim societies. According to her, according to Pippa Norris, in Orthodox and Muslim states, not only the men but also women think that politics is not the business of women. So, the number of members of the parliament is an indicator of a good democracy, but not on its own, of course. For instance, Rwanda is amongst the top places of world ranking in relation to the number of women members of the parliament, but Rwanda is not one of the most democratic states in the world. So, the participation of women in politics and gender equality depends on the level of patriarchic social order. In societies where the patriarchic social order is powerful, the women representation in politics is weak. Let me give you an example about the patriarchic social order. For instance, if a father is angry about his daughter who is outside for fun with her friends, if he is angry about the daughter, you are a girl, why you are going outside with such a pressure, then it's a sign of patriarchic world order. It's a sign of patriarchic social order. That's just an example. Just an example. But if you search for the patriarchic order in the Google, you will have some more explanatory information about that. I'm just giving you an example. Dear friends, in some states, such as Belgium, there are gender quotas, and those quotas are adopted in order to increase the level of women members of the parliament. In Belgium, there are some gender quotas, so that guarantees at least 30% of the candidates should be women, and all the political parties need to show at least 30% of their candidates as women in general elections. But finally, United States of America is one of the most democratic countries in the world, but all the US presidents were men, and Mr. Trump, he is a man. There had been no woman president in United States of America. And another thing which is relevant for feminism is the gender equality. Dear friends, feminism supports gender equality in social, political and economic life, equal women representation in parliament, and freedom to sexual orientations. That's the gender equality, or we might also call it social gender equality. In feminist point of view, there is the anti-militarism. According to feminism, there is a linkage between war and gender, and the feminism is essentially an anti-militarist approach. It analyzes the linkages between war and gender. It analyzes the trauma of women losing their husbands in war, or of women being raped in war. It also focuses on civilian casualties and the effects of war on children and women and the society as a whole. And it tries to develop peace-preserving methods. That's the anti-militarist essence of feminism. According to the feminist point of view, the male-dominated rationalism of capitalism does not pay attention to economic oppression. Likewise, the male-dominated warrior heroism of nationalism does not pay attention to peace and human rights. According to feminist point of view, the current male-dominated political thought and its practices could be changed when the gender equality is provided. So, when more women are included in the decision-making processes. And final thing, all the women are not feminists and all the women are not anti-feminists. So that's an interesting fact. Not all women are feminists and not all men are anti-feminists. Dear friends, that will be all for today's class. I'll be glad to meet you on our forthcoming class next week. Have a nice day.